especially in Nigeria's middle belt, with zero accountability. We should not repeat that mistake in Tanzania. The Trump administration was right to initiate a review of the U.S.-Tanzania relationship. The ongoing repression of Christians should be met with consequences.
All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Before we get into today's clip, I'll just say it. If you've been following these confirmation hearings, you know Ted Cruz has been on a tear lately, holding nominees accountable. This clip is a good example why. We're about to watch a Senate hearing where Cruz questions a State Department nominee about Guatemala, migration, cartels, and a really underrated angle about China trying to pull Guatemala away from Taiwan. Watch how specific his questions are. He's not doing the theatrical grandstanding thing you see from a lot of senators. He's asking, what's your plan? What specific steps? Real policy questions. Here's the plan. We watch the full clip first, no interruptions, then I'm back with my full reaction. If you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover hearings like this every week. Drop a comment while you watch telling me what stood out to you. Let's get into it.
Chairman, I appreciate it. Good morning, welcome. Ms. Trackman, let's start with you. Tanzania is engaged in a sustained and escalating assault on religious freedom. The government is carrying out a deliberate campaign to intimidate Christians and to suppress religious activity. In the lead up to the October 2025 election, Tanzanian authorities barred Christian gatherings, restricted church activity, and weaponized state power to control religious expression. Those elections were marked by the dismantling of opposition parties and the arrest and abduction of political leaders. Look at Nigeria. This is how it unfolds. The persecution of Christians is downplayed by senior officials while violence escalates, especially in Nigeria's middle belt, with zero accountability. We should not repeat that mistake in Tanzania. The Trump administration was right to initiate a review of the U.S.-Tanzania relationship. The ongoing repression of Christians should be met with consequences. Do you believe that Tanzania is engaging in serious religious freedom violations?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I absolutely am aware of and agree with your observations about the banning of opposition parties and targeting of Christians before the October 2025 election and the bilateral review that is ongoing and that will hold Tanzania to account. That is a critical part of the ongoing bilateral review. And it's a non-negotiable for me as someone who cares deeply about religious freedom and is litigated in that area. That's something that I'm especially attuned to, and I will be keenly observing what threats continue in the country and ensuring that that is part of the bilateral review. There is a provision in the Tanzanian Constitution guaranteeing the freedom of religion. Those are words that have to have meaning. And as Justice Scalia said, it's easy to make those promises on paper. That's not enough. They have to be lived.
Well, thank you for being vigilant on that. It is needed. Mr. Rodriguez, migration from Guatemala continues to directly impact the United States. Human smuggling networks have moved tens of thousands of Guatemalan migrants into the United States. Transnational criminal organizations profit off chaos at our border and undermine U.S. law enforcement efforts. When I traveled last fall to El Salvador, Panama, and Mexico, I saw firsthand how migration routes are organized and facilitated across the region. Guatemala sits at the center of that flow, both as a source country and as a transit country. We should continue engaging Guatemala in counter-narcotics, cartel activity, and illegal immigration, and recent efforts to strengthen port security and build Guatemala's first centralized targeting center serve as cornerstones of the U.S.-Guatemala relationship. We're moving in the right direction, but more should be done. What specific steps will you take to reduce illegal immigration from Guatemala to the United States and to make sure that that reduction is long-term?
Senator Cruz, thank you. I think the primary focus has to be in developing more interagency involvement with Guatemala's police and law enforcement. We already provide training. We have vetted groups inside of Guatemala. We provide financial assistance for the training, and I think that has to be furthered. And my understanding is that the Arevalo administration has been very cooperative with the United States in that regard.
Additionally, in Guatemala, the Chinese Communist Party is aggressively working to flip Guatemala and to strip Taiwan of one of its last remaining allies in the Western Hemisphere. This is part of a broader campaign to isolate Taiwan, to erode its global standing, and to expand Beijing's influence in our own backyard. Panama and Honduras were promised economic opportunity after cutting ties, but what they got instead were opaque deals and deeper dependence on Beijing. Now the Chinese Communist Party is applying the same model in Guatemala, targeting political and business elites to push a break with Taipei. What would it mean for U.S. interest if Guatemala flips from Taiwan to China? And if confirmed, what's your plan to ensure that Guatemala stays aligned with Taiwan and more broadly aligned with the United States rather than China?
It would be a blow to national security if Guatemala were to flip its support from Taiwan to China. In my view, the way to counteract the economic coercion of China, because that's what it does, is to encourage more direct foreign investment in Guatemala by the Taiwanese government and by the United States. I think the United States can be doing a lot more with respect to countering malign influences of China, for example, in the cybersecurity area. I think we can do a lot more to encourage the cell phone company, for example, to migrate away from the Huawei software. There's no reason why the cell phone company, which is owned by the United States holding company, cannot be using a trusted vendor from the United States for its backbone.
Thank you.
Senator Cruz, thank you. And a sincere thank you to all the witnesses for attending today.
All right, we're back. That clip is a good example of why substance still matters in these hearings. Let's start with Tanzania, because that one hit hard. Trackman's opening laid out something a lot of Americans don't hear about. Tanzania cracking down on Christians and opposition leaders right before their October 2025 election. The Nigeria comparison wasn't a throwaway line either. It's a real pattern. Persecution gets downplayed by officials until it snowballs into something worse, with zero accountability. That's what happened in Nigeria's Middle Belt, and it looks like the early stages of the same thing in Tanzania. What I respect is that the nominee didn't dodge it. She agreed straight up that these are serious violations and said she'd make it a non-negotiable part of the bilateral review. The Scalia line she quoted about how it's easy to put religious freedom on paper, but it has to actually be lived, is exactly the kind of answer you want. Not vague diplomatic mush. An actual position. Now the main event, Cruz and Guatemala. This is where I think Cruz shows why he's effective in these hearings. He doesn't just say immigration bad. He builds the case step by step. He traveled to El Salvador, Panama, and Mexico himself to see the migration routes firsthand. That's homework most senators don't do. He ties Guatemala's role as both a source and transit country directly to what's happening at the U.S. border. Then he asks the question that actually matters. What's the long-term plan? Not just a quick fix. The nominee's answer about deepening cooperation with Guatemalan police, expanding vetted partnerships, and working with the Arevalo administration is realistic and grounded. Not flashy, but it's the unglamorous groundwork that actually reduces migration over years, not headlines. The China-Taiwan angle deserves way more attention than it gets. Cruz laid out something people aren't talking about enough. The CCP's playbook in Central America. Panama and Honduras were promised economic opportunity for cutting ties with Taiwan and got opaque deals and deeper dependence on Beijing instead. Now China is running the same play in Guatemala, targeting political and business elites to force a break with Taipei. This should be all over the news, and it isn't. It's a chess move for regional influence, and Cruz clearly understands it's not just about Guatemala. It's about the U.S. losing ground in its own backyard. I also liked the nominee's response here, pushing for direct U.S. and Taiwanese investment to counter China's economic coercion, and specifically calling out Guatemala's telecom infrastructure running on Huawei. Getting that backbone onto a trusted U.S. vendor instead is a concrete, actionable point, not just talk. Bottom line, this is Cruz doing what a lot of people wish more senators did, asking pointed, specific, forward-looking questions instead of chasing soundbites. Whether it's religious freedom in Tanzania or the China-Taiwan standoff in Guatemala, he's connecting human rights, national security, and long-term U.S. strategy. That's the job. Wrap up. That's my take. Let me know in the comments. Do you think the U.S. is doing enough to counter China in Central America? And is Tanzania heading down the same road as Nigeria? Drop your thoughts, like the video if you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next one.